Welcome to part 2 of 2 of the Karmann Ghia Backseat Upholstery How-To Epic. In this video, I'm going to show you how I got from here to here. If you haven't already, go back and watch part 1 to familiarize yourself with how the upholstery was originally stapled on so you can better understand how to attach your new upholstery. And with that, let the fun begin. Going to get started on reupholstering the back seat. I have everything I need here. The first piece of the puzzle is new upholstery. I got this from West Coast Classics. This is done in black vinyl and German houndstooth. It came out really nice. This is a new piece of 2-inch high density foam. I purchased this online, and then when I got it, I basically sculpted out these cutouts with an electric carving knife and a bread knife. By looking at the original material. I'm not reusing it because it looks okay, but it's actually kind of falling apart. It's very crunchy and crumbly, but it was useful to use as a reference. So if I flip it over, you're going to see that it has kind of an intricate shape. There's sort of like these cutouts here for the wooden frame that run all the way around. And then in the corner, it's narrowed out. There's like a wedge cut in here. And then in the center, there's a big triangular wedge that's cut out to fit over the tunnel or the hump that runs through the middle of the car. And then this shape right here holds the metal bracket that is connected to the wooden frame, which is the original wooden frame, which I've repainted. It's still in good condition, so I'm going to reuse that. And I've also got here the original black vinyl that goes underneath, and I've cut out a new piece to replace that because the original is a little bit moldy. There's also some triangular vinyl pieces that go in the corners, and these are all shriveled up and no good, so I've cut out some new vinyl pieces. So there's one big difference between the old upholstery and the new upholstery that might make this a little tricky to fit over the original frame, and that's the thickness of the old material versus the new. The old stuff, as you can see, is very thin. Originally, there was a layer of like cotton jute that went between the cocoa fiber pad and the upholstery on the outside. And also this seam is kind of thin, and it folds over the edge pretty easily. But if we go over to the new material, it's got about a ½ inch of foam padding on it. And also this seam right here is composed of a bunch of layers, and it's a lot thicker. So getting this to stretch over the frame might be a challenge, given that also this material that goes, this is the front, this material section is narrower than the original material on the old seat. So it might be a bit of a challenge to fit this on and stretch it over, but I'm gonna do the best I can. So I'm just making you aware that, when you get your own new upholstery, it depends on where you get it from. If you get it from a different supplier, you might end up with something that's thin like this. And so you'll need to use the felt or the cotton jute between your upholstery and your foam pad. But in my case, I'm not doing that because it's already padded. All right, so I've got my staple gun here. I'm using the same size staples that were originally used, which were had like a ½ inch crown and the same length. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get this foam padding into the corners as best I can, because I did test fit this previously, and it is kind of a bear to get this wooden frame in here and stretch the corners into place without tearing out the stitches in the upholstery. I want to make sure that I protect the stitches so they don't get ripped out. And I'm putting this leading edge of the foam here up against the seam of the upholstery. Now this piece of vinyl just fits in here, right there, like that. And take the wooden frame. This goes on top. There's a little bit of vinyl sticking out here, but that's not bad. So this vinyl is just held in place with friction. There's no glue or staples to hold it here. Now what I've also done is I put a tiny mark on the center of the vinyl. So I know that this is centered right here. So when this is upholstered on, this goes over the top like that, and this pulls over the back. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that when you set up your air compressor with your staple gun, to make sure that you have the pressure on high enough to staple through the vinyl, but not so high that the staple actually blows a hole through the vinyl, because that can happen. And you're just gonna have to manually adjust that depending on your compressor settings and the thickness of the vinyl that you're using. Before we get started, I have another seat, an original seat that I'm gonna use as reference, both for the front and the back, to see how this gets stapled on the right way so I don't screw up. All right, so here we go. First staple is going in. Well, that was anticlimactic. All right, take two. The first staple is going in place. I had the pressure set too low on my compressor, so now let's really do this. Got the center mark lined up with the center of this wooden frame. Gonna hold it on with my fingers, and here we go. I'm starting from the center and moving outwards, alternating left and right so it doesn't tug off center in either direction. Now, you might have noticed I haven't pulled over the corner on the right yet because I'm worried about the stitches pulling out and leaving holes in the vinyl. Once I staple a little more towards that area, the vinyl will stretch a little more and I can pull that corner over. Okay, so far so good. Now I'm gonna take a quick look at this seat frame. So if we check out the original seat, we see that the front edge folds over the side. So that's what I want to recreate on the new seat. So I'm gonna try to do it the same way over here on the new upholstery. What I don't want to do is overdo it with the staples, because it is kind of fun to use this thing, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to put too many staples in, even though it's really fun. And I'm going to pull the upholstery over this corner, and I'm doing my best to protect the seams and also to push this into place to make sure it's forward enough. Try not to staple a hole in my finger. Okay, so I zoomed in to get a close-up on this corner here. Hopefully I'm doing this right. All right, I took the camera off the tripod for a second so we can take a closer look at the front edge. And yeah, it does look kind of lumpy and uneven, but I'm gonna fix that by pulling this tighter and stapling in the gaps. So hopefully that will fix that. Put a staple here. Pull this up, and another staple. Okay, that's enough staples in the front, I think. So I'm going to bring this over on the side as tight as I can. Okay, this corner doesn't look so great. It's kind of flopping around, but I was trying to recreate the original look by having the side fold over the front. So what I'm going to do is put a staple in here real quick. All right, that should take care of that. Okay, on the other side, we have a similar problem. We're going to put a staple here in the corner. Hopefully that should hold it. All right, let's flip this over and see how this looks. All right. Well, I'm impressed with myself. That is not bad at all. Okay, now onto the rear edge. So in the back, this upholstery folds over and staples here along these edges, and then it tucks under the metal frame. So that's what I'm going to work on next, and I'm going to use this as a reference the best I can. But the other problem I have is that the new upholstery is much thicker. This is just like a thin layer And I've got the foam to contend with. Make sure that this is pushed as far forward as I can. My new vinyl is still in place. I'm going to pull this over the back. And I'm hoping that the staples that I have and the staple gun I'm using will go through this layer of fabric and foam. We shall see. We're about to find out in 1 second. Originally it was stapled down here, but this is much longer. So I'm going to have to staple up higher. All right, that held. It's amazing. Be careful I don't try to put a staple through this. There's a rivet there that holds the metal bar in place. The staple is not going to work there. All right. I must have hit the rivet because that staple just popped out. Oop, we got a jam happening here. Okay, clear the jam. I pull the air compressor hose out so I don't shoot a staple into my eyeball. That would not be fun. All right, I'm gonna do the other side. Pull that up as best I can. Do the same thing over here on this side. Pulling the seat cover backwards and stapling will also make the front tighter and smoother. All right, let's turn this over and take a look. All right, it's looking pretty awesome. Looking pretty good. All right, so the next step is to deal with folding this under here. So I'm just going to try to do that without making any cuts in the fabric. And it doesn't want to stay in place. Let's see. So I'm going to have to break out the scissors and put some cuts in here, I think. So what they did originally was when they folded the upholstery over the metal bar, they put some cuts here so that, I guess these are called relief cuts or something like that. And that enabled the upholstery to be folded and tucked under and stay in place. So that's what I have to do to the new material. I don't want to cut through this seam or this seam because I'm worried that the stitches will come undone and it'll start fraying and unraveling onto the top side. So that's my next step. All right, that was a little scary. Do the same thing on this side. Cut through here at an angle. All right, don't want to cut any more than I have to, just the bare minimum. All right, so that's going in much better. And I'm glad I took the conservative approach to trimming these. Okay, yeah, so it wants to pop out. Put a couple of staples in here. Put another staple here. All right, now I could put some glue in there to hold it in place, but I'm gonna leave it alone for now, and hopefully it'll just stay there. All right, now onto the corner stitching. Obviously this is unfinished, and the way they did it originally was they sewed this edge and this edge together with some twine. And then after that, they had a piece of vinyl that stapled in on this side and also stapled in here. The staples held into this coconut fiber to cover up this area and to finish it off. So what I'm gonna do is recreate that on the new seat using a new piece of vinyl, and I'm gonna have to sew it into the corner. So what I've got here is a little tiny sewing kit I bought on Amazon. It was just a few dollars, and it's got some big hook needles in here. And also the string in it is more like twine. It's waxed, it's really thick. And I'm gonna use that to recreate the original stitching that was in the corner. And it's really simple, just 4 or 5 stitches, nothing fancy. All right, so in this kit, there's this really scary looking fishhook type of sewing needle. This is the one I'm gonna use. Okay, here's a needle going through. That was exciting. So right here I'm folding the vinyl over in 2 layers so that the thread doesn't potentially tear through. And I'm keeping it loose for now. All right, so now let me start pulling this tight. When I cut the foam out, I had to thin out the corners of the foam just like the original cocoa fiber pad. That way I'll be able to sew the corners of the upholstery together, and it also helps the seat fit into the metal frame of the car itself. Just need to tie a knot in here. We'll be done. Okay, I hope my 7th grade sewing teacher, wherever she is proud of me for doing that. Originally, the corner was stapled into the cocoa fiber pad, but that's not going to work here with foam padding, so I'm putting in a small stitch. Just need to do the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, so this area right here is turning out to be a bit of a problem. While I was stapling down the corners and sewing everything in place, this popped out again. My solution for this problem area is to loop a stitch through the upholstery and around the metal bar underneath. That's going to prevent the upholstery from popping out again. I thought about using glue and gluing it down, but I'm afraid that would be really messy and it might not even stick and just make an even bigger problem for me. So this, for me, is the best solution. It's a bit of a compromise because the original wasn't done that way, but the original also didn't have the foam padding underneath the vinyl upholstery. Here's a side-by-side comparison of the back of an original seat, and here is the back of the new seat. Pretty proud of the way it came out. A professional might have been able to do a better job, but I think I'm 95% as good as what it would have been if I had paid someone. And I did take the extra time to put in these original style triangle pieces and get this folded under. I took the extra time to repaint the seat frame and the metal bracket that's underneath here. Here's the old seat. And here's the new one. I'm really happy with it. And now it's on to the backrest. Okay, so here are all the pieces I need to start reupholstering the backrest. I have the original wooden frame from a 67 Ghia. You can see that this section of wood here is actually brand new, and it replaces some particle board that they originally used to make this that was damaged from moisture and humidity and start to swell and fall apart. It was held in with these giant staples, and I had a really skilled carpenter make me a new piece to go here and put it in with some screws. I have the new foam that goes inside. It's 1 inch of foam. It's 17 by 41, and then there's some smaller 1/2 inch rectangles that are glued to the back that fit inside of the wooden frame. And I have a new piece of upholstery that I got from West Coast Classics. It's done in German houndstooth pattern with black vinyl. It's an exact match for how the original upholstery was put together. The only difference is that it's a little thicker. It has a 1/2 inch of foam, which is glued or sewn into the back. So hopefully that won't affect the installation too much. And I have some original pieces to use as a reference. Before I get started, I'm going to go over all the tools and hardware I need for this project. Here are the screws in the piano hinges that hold the backrest to the frame or the body of the car. This is the strap that goes on the top of the backrest that holds it down to the parcel shelf when it's in the upright position, and there's a replacement screw that goes into the wooden frame. This is an original upholstery nail and some replacement nails that I'm going to use at the very end of the project. Here's some clamps that I got to hold the new upholstery down to the wooden frame. Some upholstery scissors, a baby hammer, screwdriver, and here's a staple gun that shoots staples that have a 1/2 inch crown just like the original. This is the original padding that came out of the back of the 67 backrest. It's made out of cocoa fiber, and the only reason I kept it was so I can use it as a reference to cut and shape the new foam. And this is the original upholstery that came off the 67 backrest, and I kept it again so I can use it as a reference. In addition to that, I have this backrest that came out of a 64, so I'll be looking at this frequently throughout the project to make sure I'm doing this right. I'm going to start with the screws that hold the hinge onto the backrest. I'm going to put the screws in first and then staple the upholstery over them. That way I won't have to feel around for the holes in the frame later, because that will be near impossible through the thick upholstery. Instead, I'll cut out small holes, remove the screws, and then screw down the hinges over. This strap goes on top of the frame, but for now I'm going to reupholster over the screw just like the hinge screws on the bottom. I set my upholstery in place over the foam and frame, and notice an issue at the top. There's going to be a pocket or void over the transition between the wood and the foam. That's because the foam on the back of the upholstery makes the stitching along the seam much thicker than the original, and that creates a pocket when folded over. So I cut out a piece of felt to fill in the void and soften the transition. I glue it in place and give it a few minutes to set. I set the upholstery in place again and see if this helps. I might need more than one layer. So this is my solution for this problem area. This vinyl is flat. This area has a lot of foam in it. And this is completely flat, hard wood, and this is the soft foam. So what I've done is glued 2 strips of felt in this area right here. So that'll fill in this pocket. So when this is stretched over, this will be completely flat like the original. So if you try to do this yourself, you may or may not need to have this strip of felt in here, depending on where you get your new upholstery from. If it doesn't have the built-in foam, then it probably isn't necessary. Now I'm clamping the upholstery in place along the left and right edges of the frame. The Sharpie marks left on the back are actually instructions for sewing it together and are not marks for aligning it to the frame, so those are to be ignored. I'm starting my first row of staples along the side, placing one at the bottom, middle, and top. I do this so it doesn't pull in one direction. I want to make sure the staples are even from top to bottom. Then I go back and fill in the spaces between. Note that I'm placing the staples behind the stitch in the fabric. That way, when it folds over, the stitch will be hidden. I tuck the flap over the top of the frame and tighten down to make sure I have a tight fit along the top edge. I staple the edge, but not quite all the way to the top of the frame right now. Now moving over to the other side of the frame and clamping the upholstery in place. Same drill, a staple in the middle, top, and bottom. Then fill in the gaps. The staples should be in a neat row, one next to the other, but not overlapping. Don't be surprised if your staple gun occasionally jams up, even though it's brand new. A few pieces are stitched together in this corner, and finishing it off will be tricky, but I'll get to that soon. I flip everything over and get started on the top. First staple goes in the middle. I'm stretching the vinyl over it so it lays flat with no wrinkles. Second staple goes over to the side, but not to the corner. I'll get to that in a minute. I'm stretching the vinyl and feeling around to make sure the filler piece I added earlier doesn't pull up and over. Now I fill in the gaps in the staples. There's not a lot of material to work with here, so the challenge is to stretch it over and staple it down evenly. Here's my progress on the top edge so far. The top left and right ends will be a little challenging. So if I look back at the original material, the way it worked is this folded over the wooden curve. There was a staple in the side and 3 staples in the top. And this kind of folded over right here in this little corner. And then afterward, the edge that folds over the wood was like cinched down in sections. If I look over here at my laptop, I have a picture of the seat as I was taking it apart. So that's the same piece of vinyl as it was attached to the wood. There's a staple, a vertical staple there on the left, and 3 staples along the top. First step is to pull this over tight so it's flat along here. I'll staple this and then cinch this over in 3 sections. So now I'm looking at the back of this original 64 backrest. There are some extra staples that were put in here that I'm going to ignore. This is when somebody installed TMI upholstery over the original German upholstery. So I can ignore these little guys right here, but these big ones, 1, 2, and 3 held down the upholstery as it goes over this curve. So this cinches down in 3 sections, so it lays flat along the top and follows the curve here and tucks in nicely. So that's what I'm going to do next. So this involves a lot of tugging and stretching to get this to come over, but thankfully the vinyl has a lot of give. Okay, here's the first one. All right, that's number 1. Here goes number 2. And here's the third one. And here's number 4. Okay, so here's my progress so far. I think that's looking pretty good. Got this flat along the top. I've got the filler material in here, so this lays flat and there's no like hollow section. This is pulled tight against the wood, and this curves over nicely. And I was able to recreate the original cinching here. And now I'm just going to repeat this process on the other side. All right, so the next step is to fold over the sides and staple them on the back, and also to recreate the fold here. And I'm going to put in 3 upholstery nails. So obviously that's easier said than done. I have some extra material here, and I'm not sure if I should trim this away or fold it. And then this is going to fold over like that. And it's going to pull over, and this will all staple onto the back. All right, I'm going to begin by folding this over the back and stapling it down. Okay, I'm going to turn this over and work on the corner here. All right, so now this piece here has to fold and go under itself.
I'm struggling a bit right here to make this fold and tuck the vinyl under itself. The reason is I have too much material, so I need to make some very small trims.
Okay, I'm going to break out the upholstery shears. This is a little scary because I only get one chance to do this right, so I don't want to take off too much. So I'm just going to take off 1/4 inch right here. All right, well, if I compare the original upholstery to the new, looks like there's just, like, this is doubled up here. It's folded under itself. So what they did was they trimmed it out here and then they folded it. I literally just need a little bit to fold, but I don't need this bit on the edge here. I'm going to cut along this edge, make a little trim there, and then I'm going to cut out this little rectangle. Make it nice. This is missed a little bit here. Okay. Okay. That was the right call. So now I can fold this over, and I'll be able to put the nail through there, and there won't be too many layers of vinyl.
I want to make the fold here at the top first, get my first nail in, and then staple the back. That may make it easier.
Start by just pushing it through the corner here, pushing it through the vinyl. All right, I feel like one of the cobbler's elves. All right, so looking back at this original backrest, there are 2 more nails, and I can see that there's a cut that runs along here and a diagonal cut that goes there. So that's my next step. I'm gonna have to make that cut before I put the nails in.
I should probably be using some chalk here, but I get a ballpoint pen to mark my lines. Then make 2 cuts to form a wide V shape on that corner.
Okay, now I'm ready to put some staples in over here where I left off. Okay, so this edge is actually a little crooked. So I'm gonna go back in and make this straighter.
I made the cut on the side a little unevenly, so the material behind it needs a little trim too.
Okay, so this is looking good. It's trimmed properly. I'm going to put the first nail here in the corner, hammer that right in, followed by the second nail.
Getting these tiny nails started is difficult, so be patient and don't rush. If I mess up, I'll leave an ugly mark in the vinyl. So I only have one chance to do this right.
Number one and number two. Need a pair of tweezers to hold these things in place. There we go, got it started. Beautiful. All right, got the passenger side done, just need to repeat this on the driver's side.
I staple down the driver's side, same as the passenger side, and now I'm ready to move on to the bottom edge. There's not a ton of extra material to work with, so I have to tug and stretch it over. I've already made a center mark in the material and frame and lined them up before stapling. Because it's so tight here, I move over slightly to the left for my next staple. I'm being extra careful here to stretch the material and not let it slip down. I continue to stretch and pull the material in short sections, working from the middle outwards and stapling it down. I now take this moment to admire my incredible handiwork and pat myself on the back.
Okay, the final section left to staple together is the corner, and it requires some trimming and folding and tucking. It looks really confusing. So if I reference the original seat, the extra fabric here tucks under itself. There's a fold right there, and it just tucks into that section. The vinyl over here folds over, and this goes over it on the bottom, and the side wraps around the back. And then the final piece is that the front bottom wraps around the bottom and staples onto the back. So I'm going to do that right now with the new upholstery. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is make a mark here. I should probably use a piece of chalk or something, but I don't have any. And this will be covered by carpet, so I really don't care. So I'm going to put a line here, and a diagonal cut goes right there, and then it extends down this way. All right, that was the first cut. I just cut out this wedge. So if we look here, what I need to do is make another cut along here following the line of the frame. This is going to fold over like that, and the piece that's left underneath will fold up. Okay, so this side is going to fold over like that. Now, in order for this to fold up, I need to trim back the excess material right here. All right, I'm gonna make this cut right here along this edge. Okay, now I'm going to cut out this excess material right here. So the way this works is this goes over the bottom, and this folds over from the back, and this gets a staple right here. So moving over to the side, this extra piece right here, going to trim, and it's going to get tucked into the side behind the foam. It doesn't need to be this long to fold under and inside, so I'm going to take about half of it off. Okay, now that all the trims have been made, I'm ready to finish this area off. I have this tool that is used to remove plastic dash pieces, and it's handy, so I'm going to use that to fold this inside, just to tuck it in. All right, that tucks in just like the original one did. And this goes under and this goes over. This material is actually a little short here, and I didn't trim it, that's just the way it came, so I just have to roll with it. All right, so the last thing to do is to just fold this up and staple it onto the back of the seat. And you can see right here, these are the screws for the hinges, and I've left them sticking out slightly so that later on I'll be able to feel around for them, and I'll just cut a small hole and remove them and be able to put the hinges on. If I didn't do that, I would never really be able to find these holes again, especially through this thick foam, which is not how the seats were originally done. Backrest is done. It's all stapled on. It's looking good. This is a really awesome pattern. It's gonna look really nice in my car.
So there it is, the final seats, before and after. I hope this two-part video series was helpful to you. If you're going to reupholster your rear seats, depending on where you source your material, it may be patterned slightly differently, and it may or may not have foam backing. So don't blindly follow what I've done here, but you might have to make some minor adaptations to your particular seat frames and your new upholstery.
Slow.